afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to Global Atheist News Roundup, dateline 5th of August 2023. This week's headlines. At least 45 were killed after an explosion at an Islamist political rally in Pakistan. Thousands flee violence at a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. At least 5 were killed in Hindu-Muslim clashes south of New Delhi. The Pittsburgh synagogue gunman gets the death penalty. Pope Francis blasts the scandal of clerical child abuse in Portugal. Jesuit superior blames Vatican norms for blocking harsher penalties for Rupnik. A lawsuit aims to halt the opening of the USA's first religious charter school. Atheism UK held its AGM in London's Conway Hall and announced an event in the Midlands. At least 45 people were killed in a suicide bombing at an Islamist party rally in northwest Pakistan. More than 100 people were injured in the explosion in Bajwa district, where Jumiat Ulema-e-Islam Fazi, JUIF, was holding a meeting. No group has said that it carried out the attack, which is being investigated. A motive remains unclear. Officials have warned that the death toll may rise further as several people are in a critical condition. The authorities say a rescue operation has been completed and all the injured have been taken to hospital. The police chief of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa confirmed that the explosion was a result of a suicide blast. According to bomb disposal teams, approximately 10 kilograms of explosive material was used in the attack. The UN says more than 2,000 people have been forced to flee violence between rival factions at a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. The clashes between Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah movement and Islamist groups left 11 people dead. A ceasefire has now been agreed, although gunfire was still being reported on Monday. The camp, situated near the southern city of Sidon, falls outside the jurisdiction of the Lebanese security forces, so it is left up to rival factions within the camp to maintain its security, but factional disputes are common. The weekend's violence erupted on Saturday when a member of an Islamist group was killed, and tensions continued to mount through Sunday, culminating with the death of a Fatah commander, Ashraf al-Armouchi, and several of his aides. A ceasefire agreed on Sunday soon broke down, and heavy fighting was again reported, with gun and anti-tank fire echoing through the camp. More than 40 people were injured in the clashes, including a UN aid worker, and 2 schools were damaged. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees reported on this. A second ceasefire, agreed on Monday after a meeting with the local MP, appears to have improved the situation, although there are still reports of some gunfire. At least 5 people, including 2 police personnel, were killed in clashes between Hindus and Muslims that erupted on Monday around 30 miles, 50 kilometres, south of the Indian capital, New Delhi. The violence erupted after a Hindu religious procession passed through the Muslim-dominated New region in Haryana state, By the evening, the violence had spilled over into neighbouring Gurugram, where a mosque was torched, killing the cleric and injuring another person. 5 people involved in the incident have been rounded up and the others are being identified, said Nishant Kumar Yadav, Deputy Commissioner of Gurugram, adding that security around places of worship had also been tightened. The gunman who killed 11 worshippers at a Pittsburgh synagogue in 2018 was unanimously sentenced to death by a federal jury on Wednesday. The court will reconvene on Thursday, when the sentence of death against Robert Bowers will be formally imposed. The sentence represents the end of a saga that began on October the 27th, 2018, when Bowers burst into the Tree of Life synagogue and shot people with an AR-15 style rifle. At the time, the synagogue was hosting 3 congregations, Tree of Life, Dor Hadash, and New Light, for weekly Shabbat services. The gunman was found guilty in June of all 63 charges against him for the deadliest attack on the Jewish people in the US. About 30 people connected to the victims gathered at the Jewish Community Center of Greater Pittsburgh on Wednesday afternoon and spoke about their reactions to the trial and the verdict. Several said they had appreciated that the trial put together the entirety of the story for the public. Had we not had this trial, the deeds of this criminal would have been glossed over in the annals of history, said Audrey Glickman, a survivor of the attack. We now know almost the full story. The family of Rose Mallinger, who was killed in the attack, and her daughter Andrea Wedner issued a statement thanking the jury, prosecutors, and others involved in the trial. Pope Francis blasted Portugal's Catholic Church leaders over the scandal of clerical sex abuse on a visit to the country, saying their actions had helped to drive the faithful away. Francis waded head-on into the scandal, roiling the Portuguese church upon his arrival in Lisbon, where he is spending 5 days for the first World Youth Day Catholic Festival since the COVID-19 pandemic. A panel of experts hired by the Portuguese church reported in February that priests and other church personnel may have abused at least 4,815 boys and girls since 1950. Prior to the report, Portuguese church officials had insisted there had only been a handful of cases. After its release, they initially refused to remove named abusers from the ministry or to compensate victims. Francis raised the issue during a vigil service for Portuguese clergy and nuns at the capital's iconic Jerónimos Monastery, where hundreds of people gathered in February to pray for the abuse victims after the expert's report was released. The Pope demanded that bishops better respond to abuse victims by accepting them and listening to them. Speaking in his native Spanish, Francis acknowledged that many clergy and nuns in countries with once thriving parishes feel weary about their vocations because the Catholic faithful are increasingly detached from their faith. It is often accentuated by the disappointment and anger with which some people view the Church, at times due to our poor witness and the scandals that have marred her face, and call us to a humble and ongoing purification, starting with the anguished cry of the victims who must always be accepted and listened to, he said. The controversy surrounding artist-priest Rupnik, whose mosaics can be found in some of the most prominent Catholic religious sites in the world, have been regularly used in Vatican initiatives, has raised serious questions about the Society of Jesus' handling of abuse claims, and also of Pope Francis's role in the matter. Knowledge of Rupnik's abuse, which he is alleged to have inflicted upon religious sisters during his time as the leader of the Loyola community in Slovenia in the 1980s, but also in the following decades, only became public knowledge after Italian media began reporting on accusations of abuse. The Superior General of the Society of Jesus, Father Arturo Sosa, confirmed on December 14, 2022, that Rupnik had been excommunicated in May 2020 for having absolved one of his accomplices, a measure that was lifted that same month after he repented. During a January 24 interview, Pope Francis was asked if he had any role in deciding Rupnik's case, to which he replied, "I had nothing to do with this," adding that he was only involved in a small process that came to the Congregation of Faith in the past. The former superior of the now expelled Father Marco Rupnik has stated that internal procedures at the Vatican prevented the Jesuit order from prosecuting the disgraced artist-priest more vigorously for his sexual, spiritual, and psychological abuse of several women. A communication officer at the Jesuit Curia in Rome confirmed that the AP report, Associated Press report, based on a letter written by Father Johann Verschuren, the major superior for the Jesuits' international houses, is accurate. In the letter, Verschuren confirmed that Rupnik is no longer a Jesuit after the Slovenian priest did not appeal his June expulsion before the deadline. The decree of expulsion was issued for what the Jesuits said at the time was Rupnik's stubborn refusal to observe the vow of obedience after he had refused direction from his superiors to enter into a process of reparation for his abusive behavior. Responding to the criticisms that Rupnik is still a priest, Verschuren wrote that the Vatican's current legislation precluded an investigation that could have led to harsher penalty. The Vatican strengthened its laws to criminalize clerical abuse of adults in June 2021, but did not retroactively apply them to reported acts of abuse committed by Rupnik between 1985 and 2018 that had been found credible by the Jesuits' investigation team. A group of parents, clergy, and education activists in Oklahoma have filed a lawsuit asking a state court to block the opening of the St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School, which could become the nation's first religious charter school. The group claims that St. Isidore's will discriminate if it becomes operational and that it violates the state constitution and state law, which requires that charter schools be non-sectarian in their programs, admission policies, employment practices, and all other operations. The state's virtual charter board approved the school in June, and it's scheduled to open in the fall of 2024. Attorneys from Americans United for Separation of Church and State, the American Civil Liberties Union, Education Law Center, and Freedom from Religion Foundation are representing the group. In the lawsuit, they wrote that St. Isidore will provide a religious education and indoctrinate its students in Catholic religious beliefs. Indeed, St. Isidore's application states that the school participates in the evangelizing mission of the church, the attorneys wrote. Critics say the school marks a dangerous breach in the separation of church and state. They worry it will open the door for more publicly funded charter schools that would be free to promote religion and flout civil rights law. When a religious public school is allowed to proceed in one state, it emboldens religious extremists in other states to try the same thing, said Rachel Larzer, President and CEO of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. St. Isidore's backers expected it would invite litigation. They are eager to test the question of whether charter schools are bound by the same rules as public schools and whether they are truly public schools at all. Atheism UK, of which I am currently president, held an AGM at London's Conway Hall this morning and announced an evening event to be held at the Midlands Arts Centre on September the 25th. The event is co-sponsored by the Origins Project Foundation and will feature Professor Lawrence Krauss, Mariam Namazi and Professor A.C. Grayling. See the Eventbrite ticket site detailed below. And stay on this channel to watch Tercia interview logistics expert Jan Havenga, who does a lot of work worldwide for the UN. If I get back from London in time, I may join in. And don't forget to watch Views on the News, the show where our opinionated panel give their views on the items I have just reported about. This has been Global Atheist News. Please like, subscribe and share. Thank you for watching.